Good morning and welcome to Bible Study Live with me, Colin Points. I'm the pastor of Winslow Christian Fellowship. Very warm welcome to you if you're joining me either live or catching up at some other point. Hope you find this useful. So this is an hour or so of just watching me looking at the Bible on my computer screen and studying it and working through it, and in some ways there's nothing spectacular, but what it is just watching the way I think about the Bible, which is quite useful for those who think that there's some sort of magic involved in Bible understanding it and interpreting it. It really is just looking at the words, thinking about it and giving it time. Just checking. I have to keep checking to make sure that I'm coming through loud and clear, which it looks like I am. Good morning to you, Louise. Thank you for joining. Now, we're looking at this week. I thought having a break from Mark, been preaching through Mark, and so it's coming to Easter. So what I thought I'd do was look at a passage in John. And in the run-up to Easter, I thought I'd look at Jesus when he came to Pilate. So it's quite a long passage, but so I don't know how far we'll get with it this morning, but we'll see how we get on. So it's John chapter 18, starting at verse 28, and going through to chapter 19, verse 16. Okay, I'm going to read the passage now. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews.
but my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I'm bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man!" When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down at the judgment seat, on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, and in Aramaic, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, "Behold your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. Well, oh dear. So that was... sorry, I'm just going to wipe this up. Clumsy. Didn't want to slip up on my coffee spill. Right. So there we are, the Pilate and Jesus interacting. And Pilate interacting with the crowds as well. And he's obviously trying to find his way out of making some kind of decision. So I think Pilate's an interesting character. This is about the interaction between Pilate, Jesus and the crowd. And it's not always clear who is in control? I suppose that's one of the interesting things, just reading through it that time. Obviously Pilate's got power and authority that he's been given by Caesar, but the crowd, they've got this manipulative authority. They can sort of exert some control over him, and in the end Jesus seems to be asserting his authority, and in fact said that to Pilate, you know, you've got no authority that hasn't been given you by God, I think he said. Given you from above was the phrase he used. So that's an interesting dynamic, the who's in control. Who's in control? Yeah. Okay, well let's just trundle through it verse at a time. Got quite a bit of Jesus' own words going on throughout this passage, but we'll just go through them, and when we come to Jesus' words we'll deal with those. So verse 28, then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. Yeah, that's interesting detail, isn't it? So Caiaphas, who's Caiaphas then? To Annas, high priest. Yeah. So Jesus had been arrested and taken to Caiaphas, the high priest, but now he's being brought to the Roman governor, and the reason that we're going to find out is that the Roman governor's got the authority to execute him, and the high priest hasn't. We'll see that the reason for this is that the governor had the authority to execute, whereas the high priest didn't. They wanted Jesus dead, but that's going to come clear as we go through the passage. Early morning. His arrest and trial before the high priest had been at night. This isn't the trial before the high priest was not public, because most of the public were asleep. So it doesn't seem to be an honest approach to justice, certainly, and I think we'll see that there's no desire for justice as we go through the following passage. and they didn't enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled but could eat the Passover. Entering the home of a Gentile, I think it was the problem, isn't it, would make the Jews unclean and therefore unable to take part in the Passover, which was a key festival for the Jews. Didn't want to miss that. Okay, so Pilate came out to them. Pilate is very accommodating, really. Coming out to see these Jews because they wouldn't come into his house. Probably scared of what they might do. His job was to keep the locals in order, and the Jews had a tendency to rebel and riot. You don't want that. It might mean he loses his job if he fails to keep them in order. And that's the big control they have over him. That's why they're able to manipulate him throughout this story. Right. He asks what accusation they have against Jesus, because he's aware of his responsibility and has I think the Roman legal system was very kind of clear. He would have learned this as he was coming up the ranks. He would have had legal training. He's aware of his responsibility and has had Roman legal training. So he would be careful to work within Roman law, rule of law. Okay, so he's asked about that question. What accusation do you bring? And they answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you, which is a very vague answer. Verse 30, their answer is vague. They want Pilate to execute Jesus, but probably realise that their accusation, which is essentially a religious accusation, Jesus claims to be God, which they find blasphemous, but Pilate really doesn't care about. So they know that Jesus, for them, Jesus is an offensive person. He's broken some serious laws, claiming to be God, claiming to be the king. As far as they're concerned, he's committing blasphemy, but why should Pilate care about any of that? So, rather than answering his question, what accusation do you bring against this man, they say, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you. So Pilate can see straight away what's going on. And then in verse 31, Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. The Jews said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. So that's kind of putting us clear as to where we're at. Pilate realises this is a religious dispute and tells them to deal with it themselves. They don't want to deal with it themselves because they want Jesus executed, and only Pilate can do that. Okay. Right, verse 32 says this was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. Jesus had talked about his death and this interaction fulfilled that. When did Jesus talk about his death? That's the question. Right, let's get a quick commentary scan and see if we can find a reference. What are we on? 32. So there. Whatever the mix of religious and political motivation, John the Evangelist detects the hand of God himself. The political reality is guaranteed that when sentence was finally passed, Jesus would be executed by crucifixion, not by stoning. Okay, so this isn't a question of that. Yeah, so it's the fact that Jesus had talked about being crucified rather than stoned, and the Jews could stone him to death. Well, that would be their approach. They don't crucify, they stone. In fact, that's what they were going to do to that woman caught in adultery, weren't they? Stone her to death. So why didn't they just do that? The text does not say that the Jews wanted Jesus crucified rather than stoned, ostensibly because they remembered that anyone who is hung on a tree is under God's curse, and they wanted to ensure that Jesus would be viewed as accursed. Rather, John is saying that the flux of events, including the brute facts that the Romans had to sanction capital punishment, brought about the fulfillment of Jesus' words, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, his being lifted up from the earth. Okay, that's when he's talked about it, right? This is John chapter 12:32. But when I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. sometimes it's hard to understand what the commentator's saying, but I get that now. The Jesus described his death as being lifted up from the earth in John 12:32-33. So which presupposed that it would be the Romans who would execute him by crucifixion, not the Jews who would stone him to death. Yeah, that is an interesting thought, isn't it? That a more straight line for Jesus would have been the Jews turned against him, didn't like what he was claiming, and stoned him to death. But it didn't work out that way. It was this Roman execution on a cross. And that was how Jesus predicted it, that he would be lifted up. Yeah, interesting. So verse 33, so Pilate entered the headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" So Pilate's been outside. Pilate was outside to prevent the Jews from being defiled, but he sees Jesus inside, which means no one had any qualms about Jesus being defiled, even though he's only the accused and should be viewed as innocent until proven guilty. Although I'm assuming the Romans had a principle of innocent until proven guilty, but did they? Having said that, did the Romans follow the principle of innocent until proven guilty? Come back to that question some other time. So Pilate's question to Jesus is, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Now, how does he know that's the accusation against him? Because they just said, he asked what's the accusation, and their answer was, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you. So they've not actually said that he claims. How did Pilate know to ask this, seeing as the Jews have not mentioned it. Did John leave that bit out, or has Pilate been aware of Jesus turning up on the scene and talking about the kingdom? It's possible he's picked up the gossip himself. So he already heard of Jesus perhaps, and that's why he goes in, and even though he doesn't know what they're specifically accusing him of, he knows what the issue is, because he's heard the talk, and he knows he heard that there's this guy going around talking about the kingdom, claiming to be a king, and thought, oh, them Jewish leaders, they're not going to like that. So this probably didn't come as a great surprise to Pilate. And it's why he knows that it's best not to get involved, because he knows this is the kind of thing that can't go well. Okay. The next verse 34 says, Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Interesting question. Why does Jesus want to know? Because it's interesting, the others, the Jews haven't told him, but somebody must have said this about Jesus being king, hasn't they? Interesting question, because the Jews haven't said it to Pilate, but someone must have. Maybe Jesus is exploring Pilate's motivation for asking. In other words, does Pilate want to know for himself? Does Pilate want to know for himself, or simply for the sake of getting Jesus off his back? Because we know he just doesn't want the responsibility. So Pilate asks him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Are you asking that as a judge or as an individual who wants to know me for yourself? I guess that's what Jesus is asking here, I think. Oh, John's Gospel is very densely packed, and when you look at a single sentence you think, what? Why is that there? Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? What do you think about me, Pilate? That's what Jesus is saying. What do you think? Pilate's keen not to have an opinion. I think that's Jesus right through and through, isn't it? This guy is trying to deal with the issue, and Jesus is saying, well, what about you? Straight away, that's the first thing he says to Pilate. do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? So he's immediately, Jesus is the one who's on trial, and yet immediately he's scrutinising Pilate, and he's going to be digging deep there, I think, exposing something of probably Pilate's own heart. Yeah, this is good stuff. Verse 35. Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Pilate's response. Is first to say, "Am I a Jew?" which is a rhetorical question. Because he obviously isn't. He's trying to say this business has nothing to do with me. It's to do with the Jewish people and their religious leaders. They are the ones who brought Jesus to Pilate, which is all true. All this is true. Pilate is probably right to think that he really never needed to become involved. Yet he's intrigued, because he then asks, "What did you do?" And it's almost a kind of gossipy question. What have you done to really make them that angry? How did you manage to upset them that much? "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me." And he could have just walked away there, but then he goes, "What have you done?" So as much as he wants to get away from Jesus and try to shrug the responsibility off, he can't help himself. He wants to be rid of Jesus, but can't help himself from asking this question. Okay, oh, this is a good one. Verse 36. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from the world." Wait a minute. I'm going to do, I think, is copy the text, and then let's go over to the word processor, put the text in there. Jesus' words here. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from the world." Let's break this down. So you've got a start and finish is the effort, the statement, "My kingdom is not of this world," and then he finishes, "But my kingdom is not from the world." I wonder what the significance of versus from. And then you've got at the centre of it, "My servants would have been fighting." That's the key evidence. That's Jesus' evidence, I think, that he's saying, look, you don't need to fear me at a political level because nobody's trying to overthrow Caesar. My servants would have been fighting, he's saying. Look at it. Why am I here? If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But nobody's fighting against that. Sometimes these densely packed sentences of Jesus need to be broken down in this way, because it's really hard to see. I wonder if I can actually do that. Could I do that on here? It wouldn't look. No, get rid of that. Oh. It's not quite as clear on the notes page, but kind of helps. So yeah, this is the evidence of Jesus. that his servants have not taken up arms to prevent his arrest. Now, I guess we know from what happened in Gethsemane that they did have a go at it, and he stopped them. You know, they tried in the garden, but Jesus stopped them. Forcefully taking control of the government was never Jesus's aim. He didn't even want to resist when the authorities tried to stop him. He allowed them to arrest him. Not fighting the evidence that Jesus interested in the next world. The disciples are to be in the world but not of the world. That's what Jesus prayed in the garden in John's Gospel. That they would understand that. And the implications of being in this world but not of the world are severe, aren't they? There's Jesus accepting arrest and accepting that he can be crucified because his kingdom is not of this world. He can accept all of this. I'm about heaven. I'm sure there's more to see in that verse, but I'm going to have a look at next verse now. Verse 37. Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Jesus' words are really dense. Let's do another one, shall we? Okay, another look at this passage. So, what did Jesus say here? You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. So, there's two purposes. One, I was born. Two, I've come into the world. So it's two ways of saying for this purpose, isn't it? For this purpose I was born. For this purpose I've come into the world. Same thing, coming into the world, being born. to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. So what is that phrase? That's central, to bear witness to the truth. This is his purpose, to do this thing, to bear witness to the truth. I've come to tell you something that I have seen, that I know that I... So Jesus is on trial, but it turns out that he's now a witness. He's giving his evidence in his trial. And this is all in answer to the question, or yes, so you are a king. And he says, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Well, he's changing the subject. He's going from you say that I'm a king to I'm all about the truth. He's not denying he's a king. He's not affirming he's a king. He's changing the subject. John's Gospel is a lot harder than Mark's Gospel, I have to say. But it's good stuff. Very good. But what do we make of it? So Pilate seems to, well, yeah, Pilate picks up on what Jesus says. Picks up on Jesus's statements about the otherworldly kingdom, and asks Jesus to confirm that he does claim to be a king. But Jesus neither confirms or denies. So Jesus has pretty much said, I am a king. He hasn't said it outright. He said, I've got this kingdom, but it's a kingdom of another world, and my servants have not been fighting to protect me. Louise is asking, could the servants be angels, as his kingdom is from another place? It's a good question, because the disciples are not referred to as servants usually, so they could be angels. Come back to that one another time. Look in the commentaries. But so Jesus is neither confirming nor denying. He's teasing almost that he's a king, but saying, I'm not a threat to Caesar. And then he says, so you are a king, says Pilate. And then Jesus answers, you say that I'm a king. He's almost claiming to be a king, and he's there, but he's not quite giving Pilate carte blanche to do what he wants. So what Jesus will say is that he is a witness to the truth. That's what he came into the world to do. That is his heritage. Born to be a king, well, born to be a witness. All his followers love and recognize the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. That's another way of picturing the kingdom. Rather than talking about kings and kingdom, let's talk about people who are of the truth. That's just a must. It's just less threatening, isn't it? Kings, less threatening than talking about kings and kingdoms. So is Jesus being careful and tactical with his language here, knowing that saying the wrong thing would lead, saying not so much the wrong thing, saying the right thing in the wrong way may not be helpful. Not that he's trying to avoid being crucified. I think he knows that's going to happen. Let's go on to verse 38. It's nearly 11 o'clock. Barely scratched the surface of this passage. I've got a lot of work to do. Verse 38. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Quia veritas. After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." That should be the end of the trial, really. Not guilty. End of trial. Pilate then asked, "What is truth?" What is truth? That sounds like a very post-modern thing to say. It's certainly a good way to avoid committing yourself one way or the other in a debate. You see the two sides furiously arguing it out, and you sit in the middle and you say, "What is truth?" After he'd said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." So then Pilate went and declared Jesus not guilty to the Jews. That should have been the end of the matter, but it wasn't. Well, it's 11 o'clock already. Okay, there's a lot more passage left, and I'm not going to get through any of it now. I'm going to have to finish the live stream now. Thank you for watching, and I hope that what we've looked at so far is good. I find this all really fascinating, and some of it's inscrutable. It's really difficult to understand, but hopefully over the course of the week I'll get a better sense of what's going on and what some of these phrases really mean, what's beneath the surface. And on Sunday we'll hopefully God will speak to us. Right, finish there then. Take care. See you again.